Let the winner in. Congratulations! You have won my contest. Welcome to my home.
Okay, boys and girls, topic of the week this week is the history of vehicular combat games. So up front, disclaimer, we're going to try not to be biased, even though we're huge Twisted Metal fans. Even though I think, most people would agree that Twisted Metal is probably the best car combat franchise, or one of the best anyway. We're also going to kind of throw in elements of combat racing into this topic. I was going to make it the whole broad spectrum of vehicular combat, but with that you kind of pull in just about anything, whether it's like critical depth or blood wake or just any kind of like aerial combat, Crimson Skies or Warhawk, stuff like that. I mean, tank games like Tank. I mean, these are technically vehicular combat games, like War of Tank or World of Tanks, whatever it is. So we're mostly keeping it to car combat and then like combat racing stuff for the most part. So in preparation for this week, this is sort of the history of how me and Matt met, which we've talked about on the podcast. Everything comes back around to car combat. So we figured, why not do a car combat topic? And so I was going through and maybe going to just try to trace the history of car combat, sort of where it came from and everything. And it got to be a bit lengthy here. So we're just going to kind of point out a lot of the titles throughout the years and talk about the ones that we sort of played and we feel like are relevant. But so I think the earliest traces of vehicular combat, at least that I could find in my time investigating, comes from a short story, The Racer, by, his name is, Ib Melchior. I don't know how you say that name. But it was published in the Escapade magazine in October 1956. This was later followed by Alan Dean Foster, a well-known science fiction writer and fantasy writer whose work I am familiar with through the Legacy Star Wars Expanded Universe novels, with his 1971 short story, Why Johnny Can't Speed. And this genre also inevitably has its roots in the late 60s and 70s classic cinema. Some would say, like, Easy Rider in 1969, starring, Peter Fonda, Jack Nicholson, and Dennis Hopper, has a sort of grifter outlaw on the back roads of America feel that some might say is inspiration for the Spielberg-directed film Duel in 1971 about a malicious tractor-trailer driver that terrorizes a business commuter on the country roads of America. And then from there, we sort of arrive at the crucial films that define the car combat genre in film, like Death Race 2000 in 1975, where the ideas of, unique characters, cars, special weapons are born on screen in this no-holds-barred, like, cross-country road race movie. And an arcade game called Destruction Derby, of all things, was released in 1975 in arcades. And that was followed up by Death Race in 1976, which was a modified version of Destruction Derby, where instead of crashing into cars, you crash into these gremlin little things. And it was sort of controversial at its time because the gremlins were sort of humanoid in the way they looked. And then, in 1979, we get Mad Max, which is one of Cynther's favorite films, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's where we get sort of the gritty dystopian car combat stuff. And this was directed by George Miller, starring Mel Gibson. I think pretty much anyone listening to this podcast has probably seen this movie. But this movie brings about, another unique trope often used in car combat media, which is the sort of post-apocalyptic setting with society in collapse, and also showcases like kit-bashed vehicles made up of scavenged parts and all these sort of wily, lawless punk gangs and eclectic armor and attire, which was followed up by Mad Max 2 in 1981. And then sort of getting back to the video game side of this, you had this game called Head On, which was released by Sega in 1979. The objective is to sort of collect dots in this little maze while avoiding collisions with other AI-controlled cars. So it's sort of like it was basically a precursor to Namco's Pac-Man in a way, if you could sort of visualize that. This is followed up by a clone car game called Car Wars in 1981 for the Texas Instruments TI-99 4A, which is one of the first home computers. So this might be the first sort of car combat game that was released on a home computer or console device. But from there, we're sort of moving into the 80s, early 80s stuff. Like you have Spy Hunter that was released in arcades in 1983. You have Auto Duel, which is a game released in 85. It was this kind of like role-playing car combat game. It's kind of hard to describe. Then from there, you got like sort of Turbo Esprit in 86, Road Blasters in 87, Death Track in 1989, Knight Rider for the NES in 1990. So a lot of these are kind of like Cruising USA style games where you're just kind of going down the road and you're either shooting other cars or other enemies kind of pull up beside you and you're shooting them and stuff like that. So that was kind of what a lot of the sort of 80s car combat games were like. And then we move into like 91 where we experienced Road Rash for the first time. Now, this is a game that me and you played a lot of back in the day. So what do you think about Road Rash?
I think it was the first racing combat game that I ever played. It had to have been. Because at the time I would have been, like 9 years old? And I remember renting it a lot. I remember renting Road Rash 3 a lot more, but I do remember playing Road Rash for quite a long time. And it was just so edgy and violent at the time. And for like a 9-year-old kid to be playing a game where you're just like kicking people off their bikes and into cars and shit, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's just something satisfying about that. Like just being on a motorcycle and just like rolling up beside somebody and just like hitting them with a chain or a baseball bat or something like that. I don't know. There was just something very like satisfying about that just gameplay mechanic to me, even back then. Because I used to, like you, I used to rent this a lot for like the Genesis, and I think I eventually just ended up buying it because I was renting it so much. But yeah, it was I think it was my first foray into sort of car combat as well. Like I said, I probably saw or maybe even played an arcade in the 80s, but I just wasn't really thinking about, you know, sort of car combat as like a genre. You would just see cars with guns, and it didn't really, I don't know, I guess it didn't really become a like genre until the 90s here with a lot of these games we're going to be talking about. But yeah, I mean, Road Rash is a classic. It's a shame that it's been tied up in like licensing hell with EA and stuff for years. I mean, we had the Road Redemption, which was supposed to be the spiritual successor that I have yet to play, and then, you know, obviously the Team 6 fucking trash game Road Rage. It's a shame that we've never got like proper Road Rash. I mean, there's been other games like, what was it, in Grand Theft Auto 4, the Lost and Damned, where you had like sort of elements of that, where you were in a biker gang and stuff like that. There's been other games that sort of incorporated like a riding on a motorcycle and hitting shit, but nothing has really recaptured that early 90s Road Rash experience for me.
What's kind of funny is, even though these games look like shit back then, it would give all of us ideas, so we'd actually go out on our bikes and try and kick each other off our bicycles and like hit each other with shit. It's just like super dangerous, but we loved it. We enjoyed it.
I guess you were more violent than I was.
We were bad. We were fucking bad. Like in the wintertime, we'd have our GT snow racers, and going down the hill, we would just like beat the shit out of each other. Like have someone ride bitch on the back, and they would like spear people off like other GTs, or like cut each other off and just beat the shit out of each other. We were just fighting all the time, basically. That's what my early childhood straight into my teens were. Just everybody was just kicking the shit out of each other.
I don't know. That's kind of different from my experience. I was always more of a pacifist growing up. I got hurt enough doing dumb shit like playing out in the woods and riding my bike just normally. I didn't need my friends to kick me off my bike. But from there, so moving into 92, we have Lucky and Wild, Road Rash 2, and then the first Mario Kart is released for the Super Nintendo, and also a game, Outlander. Now, so I didn't play the original Mario Kart. Were you on board that train from the beginning?
I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I had a Sega, and all my friends had Super Nintendos, so they had the game, so I got to play it when I went to their places.
I never really even knew it was a thing back in the day, or if I did, I just didn't pay any attention. So Yeah, like 92 stuff. Like I don't even remember the different Road Rash games. Like did you play Road Rash 2? Because I feel like I
I
would have, but I don't know.
I probably did, but I don't remember what would have made it different. Because I remember the third one was like a world tour. I just remember that, so I don't know what was different in Road Rash 2. So something interesting about 92, you mentioned the game Outlander. Now, you might not know this, but I rented this back in the day, and I always found it was likened to Mad Max, and I didn't know this until maybe like 10 years ago when I looked at it again. I was like, you know what? Something is happening here. It has to do with Mad Max. So when you look into it, what happened was the game was actually developed for Mad Max 2 Road Warrior, but the company that was developing it lost the license for it. So they had to change stuff in the game to make it different enough so it didn't stand out as being a Mad Max game. So that's why when you play the game, you're like, this is fucking Mad Max.
Yeah, I was looking at it. So in preparation for the podcast, I actually went through and looked at video footage of every single game I'm going to mention and talk about. And yeah, that was kind of what I gathered by looking at Outlander. I was like, yeah, this looks like it was definitely trying to be a Mad Max game.
And it's crazy because that would be the first Mad Max game ever, and it's not licensed as Mad Max, and it has a history with that franchise. It's just such a, I don't know. It's like it's too bad. Like it's a missed opportunity. I don't even know if it would have been that popular. Probably not, because I've played it and I didn't know what I was doing in it. It was confusing. It's just a neat like aside to like the Mad Max franchise, having a game that's not really a Mad Max game.
Yeah, well, even one of the earliest car combat games from the early '80s that I mentioned at the top, with the Spy Hunter, was actually supposed to be a James Bond licensed game as well. So there's a few of these car combat games that were supposed to be, official like movie license things that just didn't work out in the end. So that's a theme you'll see in a few of these here. But yeah, moving on to 1993, we got Crash and Burn and Mega Race. Did you play either one of those?
No, they don't ring a bell. If I've seen them, maybe, but I don't think so.
Nothing too terribly original about those. And then there was a game called Quarantine in 1994. Then here is sort of where we move into the modern era, where I think most of us came on board with car combat, and that was with Twisted Metal for the PlayStation 1, and then sort of the wrecking racing genre with games like Destruction Derby, and then combat racing with Wipeout, and then in 95 we also had Road Rash 3. Destruction Derby, while not really a combat racing game, I mean, it's more like a, just wrecking racing. But that sort of just like sparked my interest in all these racing games and car combat games. Anything where I could destroy other cars and blow up other cars and wreck other cars and stuff like that. I was all about that. But yeah, Twisted Metal was the first car combat game I ever played, I guess. And at the time, it was just so special. I remember that Christmas, right before Christmas, is being in a Circuit City and seeing the demo set up for the PS1, and me and my brother were like, we're definitely getting a PlayStation for Christmas. That's what we wanted. And so me and my best friend, we both got one for Christmas that year, and we each got like 4 games. 2 were the same, and then 2 ones were different. And I got Twisted Metal and ESPN Extreme Games, which oddly enough you could almost like throw that in this genre too. That was that sort of extreme games, like people on skateboards and bikes and luge boarding, or what is it? What do you call those? You remember?
Yeah,
what
it's
I'm
like
talking
street
about?
luge, I think.
Yeah, but it was kind of like Road Rash in that you would punch other people off their skateboards and bikes and kick them into stuff. So yeah, a lot of that sort of first year of the PlayStation 1 for me was all about some wrecking racing and combat and stuff like that. But yeah, Twisted Metal was just much like anything else on the PlayStation 1 around that time. We're sort of moving into the realm of like 3D graphics and stuff like that. So everything was just kind of mind blowing. But playing Twisted Metal, man, it was just like a weird, unique game. It was very just dark. And one of my favorite things about it at the time, which I don't really know if any other car combat games have done this since, maybe some of the ones on PC, I think in the 90s, but where they had that sort of first person like dash cam view. It was just kind of unique. I don't think they ever brought that back for any of the other Twisted Metals. But yeah, so I don't know, what were your thoughts on like, first playing Twisted Metal?
So I didn't own a PlayStation at this point in time. I still had my Sega and everything, so my parents would rent the PlayStation, and you get 2 games with it basically. And the first 2 games I actually rented were Twisted Metal and the original Wipeout. And it's crazy because those are still 2 like my favorite franchises ever. And I just remember going into Blockbuster, seeing the long boxes that were there. If you remember those, like the big black long boxes, and just look at the back and was like, oh, these look like so much fun because it's so violent and there's racing and there's cars and growing up on Mad Max and stuff like that, I was like, this is going to be great. And I remember first turning on the PlayStation and having like the PlayStation sound coming on, and then like the Twisted Metal booting up with like the single track developer sound and everything. I still remember just jumping into the game and not knowing what's going on, and it kind of being like creepy because it takes place on Christmas and the music is eerie, and like Sweet Tooth was kind of scary back then. Not really scary, but it's kind of like freaky. And I don't know, I just have like really fond memories of first playing that game and having some friends come over to show them, and they were like, whoa, this is like so much fun. And we ended up playing Twisted Metal way more than Wipeout because like it was just a completely different game. Like we've played racing games before, and Twisted Metal was just completely different. It defined like that whole genre like right away.
And then still, you know, like Twisted Metal has just like always had some of the most like unique characters and stuff like that. Like especially as we go through a lot of these games in this topic, I just feel like Twisted Metal always had like some of the most unique characters and like just memorable stuff about it, like levels and car designs and weapons and
stories,
stuff like that. It's stories. The way they had those sort of cheesy FMV movies. I was actually watching some of them the other night, like I said, in preparation for this. And
well, those actually weren't in the game.
Those weren't in the game?
No, it was all text in the game. They didn't make it into the game. Those were like released by Jaffe later.
Oh,
you didn't know? Yeah, you don't remember that?
Yeah, see, that's what I was trying to remember because I was thinking, I was like, weren't the endings just text? And then I was like, and then I Googled or I went on YouTube and was like, you know, Twisted Metal 1 endings. And then I got that video and I'm like, maybe they were in there. And so, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Well, I didn't forget, but I was like, yeah, I guess I was a little bit confused. So
those memories melded together.
That's why I had to sort of refresh my memory on some of this stuff as I was looking through this topic, because stuff like that is just like, I've played like a bajillion video games since then, and it's kind of hard to remember all the little small details about some of this stuff. But yeah, we're going to do bigger Twisted Metal topics in the future, so we're not going to talk about it too much. But is there anything else you wanted to add about Twisted Metal 1 and sort of these early games like Destruction Derby, Wipeout, that kind of stuff? Because I know Wipeout you talked about in the music topic about how important that was to you as far as the music and everything. And so I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to sort of add before we move on to the next year.
No, not really. Those games, especially their sequels too, is just a lot of time spent playing those fucking games.
Okay, so moving into 96, we got Mega Race 2 and Necro Dome. Mario Kart 64, which was the first Mario Kart I played and still my favorite to this day, because I actually preferred that battle mode in that. I played so much of the battle mode in that. I loved the little arenas they had and the sort of just trying to hit your friends with all the sort of weaponry and stuff and knock their balloons off. I mean, I'd spent hours playing the battle mode in 64, which is almost like its own little arena-based car combat game in and of itself. You know, what about you with Mario Kart? What do you think about that? Where does that stand and everything?
We still play it to this day. Like, we play it several times a year. We all get together and we like project on a huge screen or just play it on like a smart TV or whatever, and we still rock Mario Kart 64. Like, we all have, between all of us, we have like the newer ones, but it's not the same. Like, the newer ones are fun, but the battle mode for the 64 version like has not been beaten. Like, absolutely not. Even it's 4 fucking levels. It is so simple, and it's still so much fun. It's just crazy how that has stood the test of time. Just like GoldenEye. Like, these games on the 64 have just stood the test of time for multiplayer. Like couch multiplayer games.
Is that what you guys do most of the time? Do you do some racing in battle mode, or you just do a lot of battle mode?
Yeah, we do both. Not everyone likes the racing portion, and I think it's because like myself and like one other person are really good at the racing part, and the other people aren't so much, so they don't want to race. They want to do the battle because it's more even. But yeah, we go through all the games and stuff, and Mario Kart is definitely a staple in that rotation.
And then that year we also get Twisted Metal 2, which is a fucking classic. Now, I will say that when I first picked up Twisted Metal 2, it took me and my brother, we would sit there playing it co-op, and I don't know, something about it. I just wasn't digging it like right away. It didn't like instantly grab me, but after like a few hours, like me and my brother like really getting into it and like sort of learning the game. And then I remember the next day we woke up and literally just played that game like all day co-op and just fell in love with it. Spent so much time playing Twisted Metal 2. I don't know. What do you got to say about Twisted Metal 2?
I remember being so excited for TM2 that I was getting all the gaming magazines that had anything in it. You know what I mean? Like just to read about it, like the character bios, some screenshots, what to expect. I was just buying all those things in preparation. And I remember when it came out, I went and got it at Walmart and just played the hell out of it. Just played the hell. It's just crazy comparing Twisted Metal 1 to 2 and how different they are. And 2 just taking it to the next level, kind of making it more of like a fighting game. Like it has the combos, the AA combos, and the characters are more over the top. And now it has comic FMVs in it. Like it just took everything way further, and it was just like, wow, like what an amazing sequel.
This is the one that really made me fall in love with Twisted Metal, though, because I enjoyed Twisted Metal 1, but I wasn't really just sort of in love with, that franchise and the car combat genre. So I remember, just picking it up. I don't think it was even right away when it first came out. It might have been like within the first month or something. And yeah, so that just playing through Twisted Metal 2 is the one that like really made me like fall in love with the franchise there. And that's when I started to be like, all right, this is like one of my favorite franchises now, and I'm going to be following this and like keeping close tabs on everything sort of Twisted Metal. So moving on to 1997, we've got Interstate 76, Carmageddon, Streets of Sim City, Diddy Kong Racing, and Critical Depth, which is, I just want to throw that in here because it sort of goes with the lineage of Twisted Metal in that it was made by Single Track. And so you'll see moving forward when we start talking about the other Twisted Metals that were not made by Single Track, why sort of fans enjoyed games like Critical Depth, which were, I feel like that was their weakest game, and this was more like a submarine type, like underwater fighting. So another reason why I didn't really want to like talk about it and throw it in here. It was never one of my favorite vehicular combat games. I actually wasn't that fond of it. Like I said, I only played it because it was a single track joint. But yeah, I just thought I'd sort of mention that. I didn't play Interstate 76 or Carmageddon during that time. I did play Diddy Kong Racing. It was a fine carbon copy of Mario Kart in a way. But so what do you played a lot more of Interstate 76 and Carmageddon, so tell me about those.
Yeah, so Interstate 76 and Carmageddon originally were on the PC. So for Interstate 76, I played a lot of that. It's a story-driven car combat game, but it's not like Twisted Metal. It's more grounded in reality. So you're driving around and you just have guns on the front of your car that shoot, and then you can get like a something on your roof, like a turret or missiles or something like that. And it's more like the physics are more realistic, so it's a bit harder to land things. And the graphics are weird. They're 3D, like more polygonal, angular looking type stuff. Even the videos in it are really weird. It reminds me of like the Dire Straits Money for Nothing video from the 80s. Like this like old school like 3D Max Headroom looking thing. It's just so weird. God, do you know what I'm talking about? Like everything's just so angled and weird.
Yeah.
Like 80s sci-fi computer AI looking thing. But Interstate 76 is actually what started, or actually ended up becoming, the Vigilante series. I know we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, I thought there was a lineage there. I couldn't remember that either.
There is, but it's not. I don't think there's a direct link. Like the stories aren't linked. It's just the characters, and there's a lot of similarities that were borrowed to make the Vigilante series, because they never talk about like Interstate 76 or 82, which is the sequel. But I'm pretty sure that they just borrowed the likeness of those characters and the cars and stuff like that for Vigilante 8. I think it's the same developer. It's just there's no direct line.
Luxoflux or whatever they're called?
Luxoflux, yeah, it's the same people.
Yeah. So I mean, what was the objective in Interstate 76? Like, what is it, like an arena-based car combat game? Are you fighting other cars? Like, what exactly is it?
In the multiplayer, you could. It was arena-based, and you fought until like whatever, you killed the other people, and you could have, I think it was 8, maybe 12 people at the same time. I never really played it online, but the story itself was similar in the sense like of Vigilante 8, where there's like good guys and bad guys. I can't remember what it was exactly, but you were like a band of 3 people that were just out as like, you're basically vigilantes again, and you're out to like stop something. And I can't remember what it was. I'm thinking it was like government related, but you're like outlaws and you're gunning down other cars that are trying to attack you and kill you and all this other stuff. So there was a story, and I think it was simplified in the Vigilante series, and it was kind of made more cartoony, whereas Interstate 76 felt more like a movie, like an old school death race type of movie. I don't know, it's really hard. Like, I'd have to go back and check it out again to really remember, because it's been so long since I've fired that game up.
Yeah, I didn't really sort of look at it enough to get a sense of what it was ultimately like. But so what about Carmageddon? Because this was a game that was often talked about on the Twisted Metal forums as well back in the day, but I never played it, so tell me a little bit about it.
So Carmageddon, basically it's a racing game, and it's a weird racing game in the sense that you don't have to actually race to win the race. So there's 3 different ways to win like a level. So there's 1 is complete all the laps in first, 2 run over all the pedestrians in the level, or 3 kill all your opponents that are in a vehicle. And at the time, this game was super controversial because you were running over people and you were getting points for running over people, and people were just like exploding like their arms and legs and everything were just exploding, and there's blood going everywhere. It's all over your car. And you can imagine just me talking about that, how graphic that would have been in 1997. So this was one of those games where it was like, when you played it, you were like, oh my God, I'm like playing something so faux pas. I'm not supposed to be playing this. It was like GTA. Like GTA, ever since it was made, it was always controversial. And this was just one of those games where you just like, you picked a car, and each car had its own stats and had its own like weird design. Like one would have like a huge like corkscrew on the front of it. Another one had these like blades that would cut people's legs off as you went by. And I'm pretty sure it's kind of obvious that it was inspired by the Death Race movies, which is like the similar stuff. So when you play Carmageddon, you'll see characters in it that are kind of from the Death Race movie, like borrowed a little bit. And you can read their backstory, and it's kind of similar. Like, I have the new one too that came out a couple of years ago, and it's just the same thing. It hasn't evolved, but it's still fun. It's like stupid fun. You know what I mean? Like, it's silly, it's funny, it's goofy, it's violent. I don't know what else to say about it. It's fun.
Yeah, I think I saw my girlfriend had a copy laying around upstairs, so I might throw it in one day and see what's going on with it. So from here, moving into 1998, we got Red Asphalt, Rogue Trip, Vacation 2012, Scars, Road Rash 3D, Death Cars, Vigilante 8, which is one of my favorite car combat games of all time, and Twisted Metal 3. So where do you want to begin on this fucking list here?
Let's start with the lower rung ones and work our way up to the good ones. So I never played Death Cars. Road Rash 3D, I think I played. It might have been on the Saturn. Scars, I've seen it and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So there's those 3 to me are like, I don't really want to talk about those.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that too.
Okay, so Red Asphalt, I own most of these games, by the way. Red Asphalt, it was one of those like combat racing games. It doesn't hold up. I played it recently, actually. It does not hold up. It looks fucking horrible. But it has like a heavy metal type of soundtrack, which like drives the whole game forward. It's just like this metal, like, I can't even, like, when I think of it, you remember those, the cartoons that were called Heavy Metal or whatever it was?
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of. It has that, like, heavy metal, metallic, futuristic, Mad Maxy type of feel to it. And everyone's in this, like, death race where you just get a vehicle and you just shoot people and you race and just try and kill everybody on the road and get first place. It's fine.
There's another heavy metal car combat game that we're gonna get to here in a minute. That's fucking hilarious. But yeah, I watched some footage of Red Asphalt. Never really played it back in the day. It didn't look super impressive. So I guess just to touch on it real quick, because we don't really care about this game. Twisted Metal 3. Now this was a controversial fucking game when it came out because, like I was mentioning earlier, this was not made by Single Track, the people who made the first 2 Twisted Metal games. This was developed by Sony's in-house development team, 989 Studios, there was some kind of contractual dispute with Single Track. I'm not really sure what was happening there. I didn't look into it too deeply, to be honest with you. Maybe once we do a podcast on Twisted Metal, we'll deep dive on some of this stuff. But yeah, so this game came out, and I remember, once again, I didn't get this game right away. It was actually my best friend that got it, and I remember going over to his house and just immediately being like, what the fuck is this game? Just the physics were different. Everything just felt different about it. Nothing about it felt right to me, other than the fact that it had like Sweet Tooth in it. It just didn't feel like Twisted Metal. I mean, there was cars and there was combat and there was Sweet Tooth, but it was really just bad. And I just remember playing it one afternoon at my friend's house and being like, I really don't need to buy this. It's kind of funny because once we came to TMA, that these games were always banned as far as talked about on the forums. Like, it was a no that you didn't bring up and discuss Twisted Metal 3 and 4 because they were sort of the abominations of the Twisted Metal franchise, since they weren't made by the original creators. And it was always funny. Like, these last few weeks, just as a quick aside, we've been on this Twisted Metal fan group on Facebook, and it has just been a wild ride of seeing the most just dumb Twisted Metal fans. And these were always the people that we kept out of TMA back in the day because we didn't want the site just infected with these morons that just did not really... I mean, you know, I appreciate that they love Twisted Metal, and everyone can love it in their own way, I guess. But I just appreciate more now the TMA rules of, we don't allow morons here, and we don't allow people to talk about Twisted Metal 3 and 4. And it's just been a wild ride of like reading people's posts on this Facebook group, and we've just been laughing about it for weeks now. But it's been so long since I played Twisted Metal 3 that I barely remember it. And like I said, we're going to revisit these at some time in the future and kind of make fun of them. But I don't know, what were your impressions even at the time? Because I just remember, especially in the 90s, right there, like this was sort of when I was becoming like a hardcore gamer, because 97 would have been around the time, you know, I was playing things like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy 7, and all these games were starting to just lock me in of like, I'm a gamer. But I just remember distinctly, even at the time before coming to like TMA and it being a thing where we don't talk about Twisted Metal 3, it's a shit game. I just remember having that like foundation even back then, and just being that like aware of like what was going on. That's when I started like, you know, paying more attention to like coverage of video games and really getting into the sort of nitty gritty, like the, you know, inside baseball stuff that I sort of nerd out on even today. But yeah, I don't know, what were your impressions of it back then at the time?
I was super disappointed. Like, I remember renting it, and I didn't know like what it meant for a different developer to develop the game, but right away I was like, this feels different, and the characters seemed goofy and didn't fit the like dark humor that the other games had, and like the overall dark aspects of it. It was just like, now we got like a DJ club kid in here and like these other weird characters, and then we have the older characters in here too, and it just didn't feel like the same at all. It was weird. It was just a weird thing to just play it, and was like, this feels like not a completely different game, but it felt like it was a departure, like something was amiss.
Yeah, and like you said, it was the first time of being like sort of consciously aware of what it meant for like different development teams to make a game and a franchise. Because it, you know, back in the day, you just picked up shit. You didn't really pay much attention to like who made what. I mean, you saw the big names like Konami and Capcom and all this other stuff, but you didn't really sort of have this like awareness of like what it would mean if someone was like, you know, someone different made a game that you cared about, and like what that could potentially do to the franchise. So yeah, this was like the first time like really sort of experiencing those kind of thoughts and ideas, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And then they're using licensed music, so it was like looking back, it's like, man, this was a reach. Like, they really threw some money at this game to make it something more, and they actually went backwards. Like, it wasn't the right move. Like, it didn't need Rob Zombie in it, you know, like Dragula, I think, was in it, and eventually in Twisted Metal 4,
I think, right?
No, in Twisted Metal 4 he was a fucking character. But I think in Twisted Metal 3, half his fucking Hellbilly Deluxe album was on it. You know what I mean?
I don't remember.
I think.
But the only thing I will say is I was sort of watching this video recently where someone was what this guy that worked with Dave Jaffe, which is one of the main creators of Twisted Metal, and someone came up to him. It was like one of the people he worked with at his little Bartlett whatever studio it was he was doing for that Drawn to Death or whatever it was. And somebody came up with a copy of Twisted Metal 3 and wanted to get him to sign it. And so he was sort of talking about it, like how he didn't like it and stuff like that. But he did say that like the development studio 989 had like I think it was like 9 months turnaround on this game to like make this. So it was kind of just thrown together. And so he was just like, it's kind of amazing that it even works because apparently the studio didn't have a lot of time to make this game. So that might be in small part why it's kind of crappy. I don't know if they would have had more time, if it would have turned out better. I don't think so, just because of their sort of artistic ideas, if you want to call it artistic, the sort of creative directions they went in with this game. I don't think, even if you would have given another year or two and development would have made it any better, but who knows? But I just thought it'd be a interesting little aside to throw in there. But anything else you want to say about Twisted Metal 3?
Other than I'm going to play TM3 and TM4, record myself doing it, and have like actual reactions to it like 20 years after it was released. No, there's nothing else I want to say.
I guess we should talk about Rogue Trip. Talking about Twisted Metal and the legacy of single track. Rogue Trip Vacation 2012 was actually another single track joint. This was sort of their last vehicular combat game on the PlayStation 1. And this was another game that many people put up there with sort of the Twisted Metal games. It's slightly different. The sort of objective, aside from car combat, like this arena-based car combat levels like Twisted Metal, is that you have tourists that are scattered around and you have to go pick them up, drive them around, and they pay you money. And you use that money to upgrade your weapons or get health. And then you take them to little specific spots around the map and they take pictures. So that was like a little interesting mechanic that was sort of layered on top of the usual Twisted Metal style car combat. But yeah, most of the Twisted Metal fans throughout the years have always loved Rogue Trip. I think it is definitely one of the best car combat games from that era, maybe top 10 of all time. I remember enjoying it. It sort of had the more sort of zany, weird character designs and stuff like you had in Twisted Metal. The characters aren't quite as memorable to me, but yeah, I really enjoyed this game back at the time, and I just remember thinking like, yeah, this is what I was wanting from like Twisted Metal 3. So, what were your thoughts on that game back in the day?
Again, another game I was excited for, and I got it pretty soon after it was released. But funny thing is that I couldn't play it for very long because I would get motion sick because the backgrounds would turn at a different speed compared to everything in the foreground to give it this like weird like 3D perspective. so I couldn't really play the game as much as I wanted to. And it's only until recently when I fired it up again where I was able to tolerate it, because I was like, I don't know why I couldn't tolerate this before, but I legitimately would get a headache and feel motion sick from playing it.
That's weird. I've never experienced that with a video game other than a couple VR titles. Anything else that stands out about Road Trip to you, though?
Other than the fucking mighty, mighty boss tones playing in the first level. And just
Yeah,
having, like, ska music.
Yeah, it did have a very like ska soundtrack. That's for sure.
It was fun. It was like a fun, like, upbeat game. It was goofy. The characters, like you said, didn't really stand out. They were very over the top. Like you're driving around a fucking hot dog mobile that, like, its special move, like, uses its hot dog to slam its cock down on you. Like, it's just, it's just so weird. Such a weird game. Like, I like it. It's fun, but it's not Twisted Metal or Vigilante 8 or the other ones.
So let's move on to Vigilante 8, because this is, oh man, so on any given day, this might be my favorite car combat game, especially the second one, which we'll talk about a little bit too. But man, this like changed the game for me. Like this, I remember, so my first experience with Vigilante 8 was I wish I could remember the magazine. I should have looked it up, but there was a magazine back in the day, maybe a PlayStation one or whatever. This was back in the day when the gaming magazines would come with like demo discs sometimes, and I remember getting the demo disc with it's like one level and maybe like one or two cars, and I just played the absolute fuck out of this demo. Like I remember getting it in the summer, and we went camping that week or that weekend. And I remember I was playing it so much before we went camping, and like literally the first thing I did when I came in the door from being camping all weekend or whatever was just like immediately jump back on this demo. And like I said, it was just one level and maybe one or two cars, but this is where I started to fall in love with this game. It's just, man, for me, like, it's like like you said, it has a lineage back to Interstate 76, which I don't really know much about that, but it's 70s inspired characters and vehicles. I mean, to be truthful, they always sort of felt bland and boring compared to Twisted Metal. Like, I don't really like any of the characters, or the vehicle designs are just kind of generic and like 70s-ish. But I just loved the raw, powerful, physical nature of most of the weapons and specials, and how you could just completely fuck someone up with combos in this game and just blast them into orbit. Like, so you could just do all these weird things. Like you would, I mean, the assortment of weapons was very basic, but then just like Twisted Metal, you could do these little D-pad combos and like do different things with the weapon. So you had these like bullseye rockets in the game, and my favorite thing to use with them was the Roadrunner missile combo. And then so what that would do is like it would stick this little missile onto the side of the car, and it would like push them. And so you could do these little things where you could get like multiple on them, where it would just like send the car like tumbling end over end across the map. And then there was like the Bruiser Cannon, which had my favorite weapon in any video game of all time, maybe, called the Cow Puncher combo.
Oh yes, the Cow Puncher.
The Cow Puncher, man. Oh my god. And so if you combine shit with like the Roadrunner missile and then the Cow Puncher, and then you could use stuff like the Roadkill mines. You would use like the Bear Hug sort of gravitational mine. So you would like put one of those out, and they would suck one of the cars into it, sort of hold them there, and then you would like stick them with a couple of the Roadrunner missiles. Then once the mine wore off, then the car would start flying across the stage. You would hit them with a Cow Puncher, and like they would just slide to the edge of the map and just go flying off like way up into the fucking sky, to the point where like the game would just have to respawn them into the level. And then you have like the Skyhammer mortar with like the turtle turnover, where you would hit them and it would like flip the car over, so it would set you up to do even more combos. And I liked the sort of crater maker also on that mortar, where you'd hit them with it and make these big huge craters in the ground. But man, just the way you could combine all those weapons like that, like you would stick somebody with a Roadrunner missiles and he would be like flipping end over end. You would hit him with a Cow Puncher, send him flying back into this like explosive fuel canister, and then that would explode and just send him flying up into the air. And man, there was just something about playing that game and using all those weapon combinations and constantly just like blowing shit up and just like sending cars just like off the map way up into the sky. It was just so satisfying to me, and I just loved the sort of more grounded sort of nature of the game in a lot of ways. But like I used to love just filling up a stage with like those Molo buses. And those are my favorites because they're just big, huge targets, and so you could just knock them around all day. And it was like my favorite thing to do would just be just like load up a map, just load up all Molos as the enemies and fuck them up all day long. But like a cool little aside though, like one thing I used to love to do on the PlayStation 1 with the first Vigilante 8 is like, I don't know if you ever did this or if you even knew this, but you could, so once a level loaded, you could pop the top off, or pop the top open on the PlayStation 1, pull the disc out, and then you could insert your own CDs in there. And so while I was playing the level, I would listen to my own custom soundtracks. It was like the first time I ever got to do like custom soundtracks in a game. So I put in like a Metallica CD or whatever the fuck I was listening to at the time, and it would just be playing that music in the back while I'm playing through the level. And then once the level was done, you would have to put the game disc back in to load back out. But that was like one of my favorite things to do. And I had this old VHS tape where it was just like a highlight reel of all the craziest shit I did in Vigilante 8. And I had this custom soundtrack behind it where I would play this game and like record little parts of it and like edit it. And I wish I still had that tape to this day. It's one of the VHS tapes I've like lost along the way because it had so much cool shit on it, like tricks and glitches we used to do in Halo 1. But man, that used to be my favorite thing to do, is like listen to my own custom music while I fucked shit up in Vigilante 8. But
it seems like too much work.
Not really. It's really not. But it was just so unique and novel at the time because I don't remember games ever letting you do that. I think there were certain like PlayStation 1 games where you could just, once the game loaded into a level, you could pop the top open and put in a disc and play your own music. But yeah, I've rambled on about Vigilante 8 enough because it's my love. So what do you got to say about it?
I have a lot of time spent in that game too. I won't go over anything you've already discussed. The only thing I'll really add is the Crater Maker was definitely my favorite combo. And what I liked about it was, like you said, it left a crater like in the actual ground, like it created, like it terraformed the level. And I remember at the time I was like, oh, this is really cool that you're like making an impact and doing something to the level that is persistent until the level's over. And I always thought that was such a cool thing in the game.
Yeah.
And one of the characters, John Torque, his special move was called Basequake. And
yeah, I was about to mention that.
Yeah, I always picked him.
Out.
Yeah, it ripples out from the car, and sometimes it would like flick people super high into the air. Other times it would just kind of push them. But it was always great to have that ripple go out, and a car would just like boom into space. The way it went. But it was just cool to have a game at that time that had that terraforming. You know what I mean? Like you affected the ground and the level. And it was so cool at the time. Like this game did a lot of stuff that was pretty revolutionary, like the combos. And like you said, like you only had so many weapons, but each weapon had like 3 or 4 combos you can punch in, like a fighting game. The car combat genre just seems to have a lot of really innovative ideas in it, and it just never took off. And people just didn't really love these games as much as we seem to love them.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's just I just love how everything in that game, like most of the specials, like I don't know, what was his name, like Disco something, that would do like the little ball that would just like kind of juggle you up in the air. It just seemed like so much stuff was just in service of like leaving you to set up these combos, like your own ways to just completely fuck up cars. And I just loved that the whole game was just like brutal like that. Like it was just all about setting up these weird combos and just fucking cars across the map. Because there's something about, you know, even though Twisted Metal is like, you know, maybe a more well-crafted game overall, especially when in terms of like, you know, multiplayer competitiveness. But when you hit, you know, other than maybe ramming and stuff, when you hit vehicles with weapons in Twisted Metal, you never really feel that impact, you know. And that's just what I always loved about Vigilante 8. It's just the weapons had so much punch and impact to them, and it just made it so fucking satisfying at the time. All right, from there, we move on to 99. We've got Red Dog for Dreamcast, Interstate 82, Lego Racers, Road Rash 64, Mad Tracks, Redline, Revolt, Roll Cage, and Twisted Metal 4 and Vigilante 8, Second Offense. Or Offense, I don't know. So what about some of those other ones? I know we're going to talk about Twisted Metal 4 and Vigilante 8, Second Offense, but what about any of the other stuff? Because I probably played Road Rash 64, but I just don't really recall too many memories of these other ones.
I had Interstate 82 for a day. My parents got it for me for my birthday, and my computer couldn't run it. And again, like I was describing before and how horrible it looks, it's so crazy that like a computer at the time could not run some of these games because they're just so like basic and simplistic. But I never got to play 82, but I was really looking forward to it at the time because it's like an 80s inspired version now, and everything's more like Miami Vice. I don't know, maybe I'll go back and play it one day. I don't know, I should go play it just to like round it out and see how it is. But out of those ones, there was that one. I didn't like when Nintendo 64 would port over games like Road Rash and Vigilante 8. Vigilante 8 on the 64 was awful. It was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever got to play it, but it was so bad, and it had this like rainbow special level in it. Yeah,
that's the only reason I bought it.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, at that time I had Vigilante 8, the second one on PlayStation, Dreamcast and Nintendo 64. That's how much I love that game.
Wow,
and I bought the Nintendo 64 version just for that one special level. But yeah, it was definitely the worst version of that game for sure.
Yeah, it was brutal. I remember renting it after playing the first one, or after originally playing on the PS1, and was like, what is this garbage? Like, it's so awful. For the other games there, I played Redline, but it's not really worth talking about. Roll Cage, I really like that game because, again, I'm a huge Wipeout fan, and it's similar in the sense that it's like futuristic. It has an electronic soundtrack. This has lots of drum and bass. I really like that, and they just released kind of like a spiritual successor to Roll Cage 1 and 2. It's actually on Game Pass. It's called Grip. It's almost like exactly the same type of game. Like you're driving this car that can flip upside down, go on the ceiling, drive all over the place, high energy, tons of combat, really good game. But other than that, I don't even know what like Mad Trax is. Revolt.
Yeah, it's just kind of this was in the era of like some of these car combat games are popular, so these little Me Too studios would put out their little shovelware like carbon copy, just like, let's make a car combat game. So some of the stuff like Mad Trax wasn't that impressive, but I remember trying Revolt, which was like a kind of like a RC car game, I believe. And I always used to like the idea of like miniature cars in like a big environment, like sort of like you would play as a kid, where you would like have your Hot Wheels and micro machines, where you would like make a racetrack around your room or like your bedroom or something. And I always like games that sort of do that same thing. Like some of the Hot Wheels games have done that over the years. And yeah, I played a little bit of Roll Cage because, like I said, like you said, it was like Wipeout and stuff like that. But it didn't really super grab me. And then yeah, like Twisted Metal 4, same thing for me. Like Twisted Metal 3, I didn't buy it. I wasn't interested in it, especially after Twisted Metal 3. I was not going to buy Twisted Metal 4. I remember my brother coming home with it one day and be like, let's play. He was like so excited we could do like co-op and Twisted Metal again. And I remember playing it like for a couple hours with him, and I'm just like, nah, dog. And so I felt bad because I made him like play it by himself, because I'm like, I'm not playing this trash, bro. So yeah, it's like 3. I don't really remember too much about it other than like Rob Zombie was in it, and this was just even more. I think I remember this game playing better than Twisted Metal 3, like mechanically and stuff, but still wasn't what I wanted from Twisted Metal. I don't know. Got any other thoughts on Twisted Metal 4?
Yeah. I have to admit, I've never actually like sat down and really played Twisted Metal 4. I own it because I wanted to own like all the Twisted Metals. But I have like seen the beginning intro and the setup to what the story would be in the game. And I remember back in the day, somebody rented it, and I saw that video, and I was like, what the fuck are the developers doing? Like, they totally don't get what Twisted Metal is, because now it's like Sweet Tooth runs this fucking circus sideshow fucking thing, and there's all these clowns everywhere. And like, there's no Calypso. I think Calypso is in it. He might be a driver. I don't remember. But it's just like, just so off base of what Twisted Metal was. You know what I mean? It just felt like wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And then Vigilante 8, the second one. Not too much more to add. I mean, it was just more of the same. Vigilante 8, just better. Different vehicles, levels, stuff like that. So not a huge drastic change. I've pretty much already said my piece about what I love about Vigilante 8, and that still applies to the second one here. I do remember that one level that was all kind of novel at the time. Do you remember that one level where the big fucking asteroid thing or whatever would come down, the big ant would pop out of it, and you would fight that fucking ant?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember. Me and my friends would just like do that for like hours. There was something funny about just like fucking with that ant. I can't remember why it was so funny or fun back in the day, but I always just remember that when I think of that game for some reason.
Yeah, I didn't play it as much as the first one, but it had like a few things that were really cool. Like your cars could like upgrade into like futuristic versions, because both games kind of had like this space
pickups, the ones where you would like hover and stuff like that.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking about it. I remember one character that I liked. It was like a bike with a sidecar, and it was like 2 or 3 like black guys, and they're like Like I don't remember. Like was it like a Evil Knievel thing? I don't remember it as well.
Yeah, I can't remember that character, to be honest with you. I don't. It's not. I'm kind of drawing a blank on that one. I have to look at that again. But yeah. So 2000, we've got Star Wars Demolition, Roll Cage Stage 2, Wild Metal Country, and Grudge Warriors. So as a Star Wars fan, as a car combat fan, I had to play Demolition. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either. Like it was, I don't know. It was kind of hitting all the right notes for me. As just turned like car combat in Star Wars. Like, of course, I'm going to like this to some degree, but wasn't a super great game. Just kind of I don't know. I wish they would have had more various like weapons and some about the gameplay where you'd have to like recharge things. I just wasn't digging that element of it. I mean, it wasn't bad. It definitely wasn't one of the worst car combat games I ever played. Did you play this?
Unfortunately, I did, and I didn't understand why Boba Fett was in the game flying a jetpack, and he's fighting people like a pod racer. He's fighting an AT-ST. Like what? This fucking game is so stupid. This game is so dumb. It's just stupid.
So yeah, it was Boba Fett just flying around with his jetpack, like fighting literal vehicles. God, I forgot all about that. I forgot about that element. Shit.
And he didn't really like, go up and down. He just kind of flew at one height. Fuck, what a fucking stupid game.
All right, but anyway, so any of these other ones from here, like Wild Metal Country and Grudge Warriors, just look really stupid to me.
Yeah, I've never heard of those. I played Roll Cage, yeah, but the same thing.
All right, so 2001, we have Cell Damage, Lego Racers 2, and Twisted Metal Black. So Cell Damage I played, I remember the time I got that on the original Xbox, and I was looking forward to it because it seemed like a sort of Looney Tunes version of car combat, like cell-shaded, very cartoony. Just had like these little weird zany weapons, like fucking... you could have like a melee weapon that's an axe and you're just trying to chop people. I didn't like that you were only ever carrying around one weapon at a time. Like you could pick up weapons in the level, but you could only hold one and use it at a time. If you wanted to switch weapons, you had to like go pick up another weapon. It was kind of silly, not a lot of depth to it. It's kind of just mindless fun. I don't know. I enjoyed it for maybe like a day or two and I was kind of done with it. They recently re-released it on Switch, but I don't know. Did you play this back in the day?
No, I actually didn't know it existed until they did the HD version a couple of years ago.
I just remember us talking about it a few different times on the TMA forums back in the day. But yeah, it wasn't great. It was, like I said, it was passable, like kind of mediocre range as far as car combat at that time. I'm sure we both didn't play Lego Racers, so no. Just want to briefly talk about Twisted Metal Black, one of the most fucking important car combat games of all time.
It was so cool to have that next gen car combat game because it went back to its roots. You know what I mean? Like finally, Incognito, who were like the original people, like Dave Jaffe and stuff, retook the franchise back and put it back on track to where it needed to be. It was dark again. It was funny. It was grim. The characters were fleshed out. The vehicles were where they needed to be. It was a return to form. And even though it didn't play like Twisted Metal 2, which a lot of people were a fan of, they really liked that the mechanics in that game. Black like redefined that genre for like a new generation, and it was grounded in more like reality. The physics were there. It took out the ramming, which a lot of people were upset with, but I think this was like a gold standard. Like I loved Twisted Metal 2, but Black was the one that really that I just really loved, and then it went into the online portion, which like is where we all met basically. But it just, my favorite Twisted Metal game right there is Black.
Yep, for sure. Same here. And then I just remember even back in the day on so do you remember when Twisted Metal 2 PC released? Do you remember?
No,
I put that in the list and I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I never
don't know.
Played it, so. But I know that would have been before Black because TMA was a thing and people were playing Twisted Metal 2 PC in the sort of, I guess, the late 90s and stuff. So it must have
Yeah.
been sometime in the 90s.
It says
But yeah, I just
96.
remember.
So it must have
Okay.
been released coinciding with the console too.
Okay. But yeah, I just remember back in the day on the forums, like there were some people, like a lot of the old guard and veterans when we came showed up for Twisted Metal Black and stuff. There was people that were very much against it in a way. There's just people that were just always in love with Twisted Metal 2 PC, and that was going to be their favorite Twisted Metal. And I guess I kind of understand that because I never really moved on from Black too much. I mean, Twisted Metal Head On, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is the closest thing to that. But yeah, I just Twisted Metal Black just did it for me. It just had everything I wanted from a car combat game at the time. Everything I wanted from Twisted Metal. I like how it went darker, and it just even this was before the time when like everything being grim dark was like overplayed and kind of overdone. But yeah, for the time it was very novel, and I just remember me and my best friend just like playing that like every day, just running through the levels and the different stories co-op, and man, just playing like Dark Side became my favorite. I just love the ram because I was always a fan of ramming and stuff like that in car combat games, and so I got really good with Dark Side, and me and him would just run dual Dark Sides every day. I'd come over to his house after I got out of my morning classes, and we would just fucking roll Twisted Metal for hours in the afternoon. And yeah, I just fell in love with that game. Like I said, we'll be talking about Twisted Metal probably forever on this podcast. All right, so 2002, we got Bandits, Phoenix Rising, Mega Race 3, Hot Wheels Velocity X, and then the release of the hard drive adapter, online adapter, whatever it was called, for the PS2, which when you sent off this voucher, you got a free copy of Twisted Metal Black Online. And as we've stated many times on this podcast, this is where history began with me and Cynthia and all our friends that we've had on the podcast, and everything changed. Don't want to go too far into Twisted Metal Black Online, but it is probably the greatest multiplayer car combat game of all time, in my opinion. Anything you want to add real quick before we move on?
It doesn't really have many competitors.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. So I guess it kind of wins out by default. Although there were, in lieu of like doing a really deep dive on this, which would have translated better, I think, to a written sort of format. When I was going through and sort of researching a lot of these games, there were some sort of late 90s, mid to late 90s car combat games that did have multiplayer components, specifically ones on the PC. So I never really experienced those. I can't speak to those, but there's definitely more stuff in sort of the mid to late 90s as far as car combat online and stuff like that, multiplayer stuff. But yeah, so 2003 we get Starsky and Hutch, WWE Crush Hour, Mario Kart Double Dash, and then this unreleased Metallica game that was going to be a Metallica car combat game called Damage Inc. And then a game that I was super excited for at the time called Roadkill. So I don't know. I'll throw it to you and see which one of these you want to start off with here.
I played Starsky and Hutch back in the day, and it was nothing great. The WWE Crush Hour game I played too, and it was hilariously bad because I'm a wrestling fan, right? So I'm like, oh, car combat wrestling, this is gonna be great. Note the sarcasm, and it was just like, holy fuck.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I didn't play this, and I feel like I should have. I was watching some video of it the other night, and I'm like, man, why didn't I play this? Because this is like just the kind of stupid shit I would have loved during that time. But yeah, I don't know. Like, what can you say about it though? Like, do you remember anything about it specifically?
No, I vaguely remember. It was just a really simplistic car combat game where you had pickups, you shot stuff, and everyone had their like finishing move as their special move. Like Brock Lesnar had his F5, and it would like spin the car or whatever the hell it did. It was just a cash grab.
I didn't have a GameCube, but I remember playing Mario Kart Double Dash at my girlfriend's house that I was dating at the time. Her sister and her dad would play a lot of it, and I remember, the first thing I wanted to see was the battle mode, after Nintendo 64's battle mode, and just remember being like, what is this fucking trash? Like, this is horrible.
It wasn't the same.
And Yeah, and I was just like, no thanks. But have you seen some of the footage of this Damage Inc. game, this Metallica game that was
I've
supposed to come
only
out?
heard about it. If I knew it was in here, I would have checked it out. Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's not really a whole lot to say other than it's just kind of fucking hilarious. Like just Google the fucking trailer for it or something like that. I don't even remember everything I saw the other night because I literally spent like an entire night looking at all these games on YouTube. But I just remember I was just like, holy shit, I wish this would have come out because it just seems real stupid. And then did you ever play Roadkill?
It
So,
doesn't ring a bell. I don't think I have played it. No.
so it was basically this more like kind of open worldy game. It's kind of like a cross between like GTA and Twisted Metal. And I don't know, you had like different gangs and factions, and I don't know, there was like pedestrians in the streets and stuff like that. And I remember at the time just being like really excited for this because I thought this was going to be like, I think this was right after GTA had come out, like GTA 3, because wasn't that like 2002 or something like that, or 2003? So this would have been around the same time. So I remember like thinking like, oh, Twisted Metal and GTA in a game, like that would be cool. I remember just like I was so hyped for this game and chasing down like any store that like certain stores had a demo disc thing that would have this on there, and I remember trying to track it down, and I found it at a GameStop and played a little bit of it back in the day, and then yeah, by the time it came out, I was just kind of disappointed in it. It's one of the more unique games, car combat games of that time. It was definitely doing some different stuff. It's not horrible. It just wasn't what I wanted from it. And weirdly enough, though, I think David Jaffe was like an associate producer or something on it. Like I didn't even know that until the other day when I was looking at something in that Twisted Metal fan group on Facebook. Someone mentioned that, like in the credits, they showed a picture of it, and I was like, "Holy shit! I didn't even know he had some kind of involvement in it." I don't remember that being a thing at the time, but maybe it was just like consulting on it, or so. I don't know what his connection is to it, but I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I guess if you never played it, there's not much more to talk about there. All right, so 2004 is a game called Mashed, which is nothing, and then I just threw in Flat Out. Is again, it's sort of that lineage of Wrecking Racing. It's one of my favorite racing franchises. It's not car combat per se, but it has sort of tangentially related. But 2005 we have 187 Ride or Die, which was like sort of like almost like a 50 Cent type like gangster game where you're like rolling up and doing like kind of drive-bys on other cars and shit. It was real stupid. Mario Kart DS, Jack X Combat Racing, Fired Up for the PSP, Pursuit Force for the PSP, and then Twisted Metal Head On for the PSP. Did you play any of those games in there other than obviously Twisted Metal?
Yeah, I played the DS Mario Kart, which wasn't too bad. I think I did play the Jack Combat Racing one. I don't
How was
remember
that? Because I never played that.
I just remember being kind of like, like Diddy Kong Racing. Like it's kind of like
Yeah.
that. Or just kind of like just a reskin, not the same. Meh.
Yeah, like all the fucking kart racers do. Just we made that Mario Kart clone. Here it is. But yeah, I remember at the time, you still had your Twisted Metal black people for the most part. They were working on this new Twisted Metal Head On, and this was going to be the first game that was going to launch, even though it was on a handheld on the PSP, which none of us were really excited about. It was going to be the first Twisted Metal game to launch with, online shit like built into it, ready to go from day one. And I remember that summer, or whatever it was, like I didn't have a lot of money, but I cut grass and did all this, anything I could do to save up to buy the PSP because I wanted to play Head On. And when it came out, I thought it was pretty decent, especially for something on a handheld, and sort of felt like a lot of the mechanics and sort of physics of Black were there. It was a little bit more colorful, a little bit more like Twisted Metal 2, so it's kind of like if you mashed up Twisted Metal 2 and Twisted Metal Black in a way, which I think was a pretty good marriage. I think I was higher on this game than a lot of people seemed to be at the time on TMA. But I don't know, what were your thoughts on that game at the time? Did you pick it up day one?
No,
like I did?
I didn't because I couldn't afford a PSP. I was just thinking like this is a serious investment. for one game, like super expensive. And I remember all you guys were getting it, and there was just mixed reviews. Like some people liked it, some people hated it. There's a lot of just homing, like a lot of the weapons just home onto the cars, so some of the skill was gone. I actually didn't play it until they released it on the PS2, and it came with the Twisted Metal like Harbor City, like side stuff or whatever to show like they were making a black sequel. But that's that. When I did get to play it, I was kind of like, it's kind of like Twisted Metal 2, but not. It's not as fun. I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, did they have online functionality for the PS2 version?
I don't think they did. Maybe they did, and I didn't try it.
I don't think so, because I don't remember us ever really discussing that.
No, yeah, I don't think it did.
Yeah, Twisted Metal Head On was very short-lived on sort of TMA, I think, for the most part. Like I said, you had to buy this handheld to even play it initially, and with a new sort of platform comes its own problems as far as like connecting to the internet. This was like sort of early I don't know, it was just like kind of like early Wi-Fi stuff. Like I just remember like I can't remember all the details about getting online with it, but I remember it being like very complicated. Like you had to go somewhere where they had like hot spots where you could like get online. So I think I went to like a McDonald's one time just trying to play it online. It was just like it wasn't a very smooth experience. And I think because of some people not liking it, you had to play it on this handheld. People didn't want to Twisted Metal on a handheld, and some of the sort of connectivity issues, plus you wouldn't have had voice chat. So we still wouldn't have had voice chat in the Twisted Metal game. And I think a lot of people I think it just kind of died pretty quickly. But, it wasn't a horrible Twisted Metal game. And, it could have been better. I wish it would have just launched on PS2. I think it could have been a spiritual successor to Twisted Metal Black and Twisted Metal Black Online. I wish that would have been the roadmap for that game. But once again, we're sort of let down by a car combat game that had so much potential and didn't live up to it.
You know what? You know what? You missed Twisted Metal Small Brawl.
Yeah, I did. I just realized that. What year did that come out?
I don't know, but it was actually a really good Twisted Metal game. It was weird in the sense that it was like little RC cars and stuff, but it was solid. It was a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I forgot because like when I was going through the Wikipedia to put this list together, like the Twisted Metals were just all under one thing, and so you had to, if you wanted to portion out the different Twisted Metal titles in the different years, you had to actually click out to the Twisted Metal Wikipedia, and so yeah, I guess I just forgot to put that in. So yeah,
it's 2001.
My bad.
It's 2001.
Yeah, my bad. So that would have been the same year that Twisted Metal Black came out, but that was on the original PlayStation though, right?
Yeah, it was a PSX game.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put that in there. I should have been. But that was one I missed that year. Like I didn't play it until after the fact, and I don't know. But by that time, like I was playing Black, so going back to that was like, Like I was like, I don't want to go play a PlayStation 1 game. You know what I mean? So I kind of just like missed out on that whole thing. I remember it was kind of like a Twisted Metal Head On thing where like a lot of people said it was fine. It was a fine Twisted Metal. I don't remember who made that one though.
It's actually Incognito, so it would have been when they reformed, and they probably made Black at the same time.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I just never played a whole ton of it because, like I said, by that point I was all up into Black, so I didn't really care. But yeah, so sorry I missed that. I thought I would have been pretty thorough on this list here. All right, so 2006 we got Auto Assault, which was like this was like when sort of MMORPGs were like the big thing, and I remember them trying to make this car combat MMO. Do you remember that at all? I remember playing it briefly and being like,
I played the beta.
Yeah, what'd you think about it?
I was like, this isn't going to last very long. Like it was a neat idea, but it just no.
And it sure as fuck did not.
No, it didn't.
And then you had Crash Day, and then this was one of the funniest ones that I found was Extreme Metal Race, or no, it's called Earache Extreme Metal Racing. Now this is when you're talking about that. What was it? What was the one you were talking about earlier? It was like heavy metal themed or whatever.
Red Asphalt.
Yeah, this is like that, except way more like corny. This is like almost like a brutal legend meets a car combat game, and just like straight up death metal all up in this shit, and just over the top and cheesy. Sort of like it's more of like a combat racing game. So you have like tracks and stuff like that, but just weird. Like the weaponry was pretty boring from what I saw. I never heard of this game until like last night or the night before when I was looking it up, but it's kind of hilarious. You should go Google this. But this year was also when the 360 came out, or no, 360 would have been 2005. That would have been the end of 2005. So in 2006, though, we had Full Auto, which was a combat racing game, which at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of games on the 360 and stuff, but this one was pretty fun. I remember liking it quite a bit. I don't know. What about you? You played it back in the day, I assume?
I played the second one.
Okay. There's another game called Hard Truck Apocalypse, which is another game you just have to go look up because it's just so bad and stupid.
These sound like fucking bargain bin titles.
I mean, some of them are, though. That's what's funny about them. Like, this one definitely is. It's so bad. And then another game called Novodrome. But yeah, it just, as far as talking about all these weird fucking games, like there's some more. Like, let me just move into 2007 here, because some of these you gotta see these to believe them. Like this Dark Wind, War on Wheels. I mean, I'm not even gonna try to describe it. It's just fucking. This is like, I think it's like a turn-based like strategy car combat game, and
What?
it looks so bad. It's just like, why was this even made? And then you have this game called Wipeout, which is from this Canadian company called Spin Masters or something like that, where they did a lot of, I guess this was almost before like the sort of toys to life stuff, where you would buy these card packs and you got this little swiper machine, almost like a credit card swiper. And this hooked up to a game that you would install on your PC. It was like a car combat racing game. And you would buy these cards and swipe them in, and like that's how you would get like different weapons or different things for your cars. And you would go online and compete. It died very early on because no one gave a shit about this, especially when you're asking people to like buy these little card packs and stuff like that. It's just the most fucking bizarre thing that I discovered going down this car combat rabbit hole. So
Hey,
another thing I recommend going and watching.
It sounds like it was ahead of its time, to be honest.
In some ways, the
Yeah.
whole little toys to life thing became like a thing like shortly after this. And then also that year we had Full Auto 2 Battle Lines, which is the one that you said you played. What were your thoughts on that game overall?
It was fine. Like, it was like I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. Like, it was fun.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. And then also that year we got Vigilante 8 Arcade, which was an Xbox Live Arcade downloadable Vigilante 8 game, complete with multiplayer. And this was kind of a thing that we all played for a little bit there. I don't know. I'll let you tell your thoughts on this game.
I remember we were all excited to play this because like, oh, finally, like a new car combat multiplayer game. We got it, and it just, the physics in the game, basically whenever you get hit by something, or if you like went over a jump wrong, your car would just like float and skate around. And it was just like you're bouncing around like a fucking ball. And I remember I hated that, and I know a lot of other people hated that too. It was just, it wasn't like the original Vigilante 8s where like if you got hit, you would just get pushed around, whatever. It was like you couldn't control your fucking car. It would just kind of like balloon itself across the level. Like the wheels would just touch the ground and it would jump around, and you couldn't turn, and you're getting bopped around. It was just, it's just shitty. I remember it being shitty, and we didn't really care for it that much.
Yeah, it was very short-lived, but I just remember like Martyr gave us an in with the developers, and I remember we were talking to the developers at one point, and we were all like, yeah, where are these big car combat Twisted Metal fans? And I was like, yeah, I'm a huge Vigilante 8. This was like the game I'd always dreamed of, like a online multiplayer Vigilante 8 game. And it just, to be honest with you, I just don't remember that much about it, but the only thing I remember is like you could hook up the Xbox camera, and like anytime you died or would it just be showing your face the whole time you were playing?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I think it did do that.
Yeah, I can't remember if it like took a picture like anytime like a person killed you or something like that. And so it would it would always be like pictures of me just like drinking beer when I got killed, and I'll just be like take a swig of my beer, and it would just show that at the top. And I remember that's like the whole reason I bought the camera for the 360 was for this fucking game, so we could all have our dumb faces up there for these like kill cams and shit. That's the only thing I remember from it. And yeah, I remember us playing for like a month or so, maybe. And yeah, it's just like a lot of games of that era where like there's not a huge online community for this, and developers are going to move on. And I don't really know what happened there, but yeah, we all were just kind of like, eh. So it was yet again another disappointing car combat game, because we've just never gotten the car combat game with the multiplayer it deserved. Like Black was the closest, but that was just a one-off thing where they just released it. It was never patched. It was never updated for balancing issues, and we didn't have team play. We had to force ourselves to play teams, and so our whole like history of car combat multiplayer games has just been one disappointment after another, and it's so fucking sad, man.
It's fucking crazy to look at that and be like, okay, well, Twisted Metal Black Online was this like mail-in back of the cereal box fucking throwaway game, and it ended up being the best thing ever that brought us together, and we still talk about it to this day. And we never had like you said, like a proper sequel to like really do it justice. Even Twisted Metal 2 PC had issues with connecting people together and a bit of lag and this and that. So like there hasn't been this like streamlined game, there hasn't been this streamlined car combat game that we deserve. And even with the last Twisted Metal that came out, it was just online didn't even fucking work. They fucked it up day one. You know, so like we'll talk about that after, but it's like you're absolutely right. We didn't even get like the online car combat game that this genre deserved.
Yep. So moving on from there, we'll go into what is basically just the petering out, the downfall of the car combat genre from here on in. Few notable things moving on, but 2008. So you had Pursuit Force, Extreme Justice, and Mario Kart Wii. Any thoughts on Mario Kart Wii? I didn't care for it again.
No, it's more like a dumbed down kid version.
Yeah, I didn't care for the Wii. I never had one, and I certainly wasn't going to play a Mario Kart on it. 2009, we had Hot Wheels Battle Force 5, which is a Wii shovelware shit game based on a cartoon. And then we had Zombie Driver, which I guess was the only interesting thing that year, but it wasn't really that great to me. Did you play Zombie Driver at all?
For 2 minutes.
Yeah,
it's like a mobile game,
here.
you know what I mean? Like it's like a one-trick pony.
Yeah, and then 2010s where we had a small spark of some interesting stuff. We had Blood Drive, which was pretty lame for the most part. Blur, Mod Nation Racers, Split Second, and Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Now, I know you're a huge fucking fan of Blur, and I think it's one of the best sort of kart racer, combat racing games probably ever made, right?
Yeah, 100% Blur was like the adult version of Mario Kart. Like if you took Mario Kart at its best and you turned it into like real cars with like with skill involved in shooting the weapons and actually racing and all that stuff, that was Blur. Like that game was fucking incredible, and I'm so disappointed that it never got a sequel and the developer shut down and nobody else has tried to copy that like to that level. It was just an amazing game. Amazing. So amazing.
Yeah, well, it's kind of sad because also that year, you know, we had Split Second, which was similar. It was sort of wrecking racing, but where you could do things and fuck up the track. So you might like explode these canisters, and it like changes the whole race course. And so you would do that while people were driving by shit to try to blow them up. It's a little bit like Burnout in that sense. But yeah, between Blur and like Split Second, it was just like it's kind of the last hurrah. We've sort of seen not only car combat die over the years, but also these just like really experimental racing games and combat racing. As these games get more expensive to make, we're pretty much only getting like the top tier racing games now. Like you're going to get your Need for Speed and your Forza and a couple others, and that's pretty much it. And it's so sad that the car combat and vehicular combat and combat racing and all this stuff is just not super viable outside of the kart racing genre, and it's sad that we can't get anything like Blur and stuff like that, because this was sort of the last year I remember like really interesting stuff like that. And even Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, that was to me one of the better kart games outside of Mario Kart 64. I
Yeah.
never played the other ones, but what do you think about those?
Split Second was fun. Sonic and Sega All Star Racing is a good game. I like it. Again, it's kind of like a dumbed down Mario Kart, but it's pretty solid, especially for a Sega game. I actually really liked Mod Nation Racers, specifically because you can make your own tracks. Like you'd paint the track in like this like creation mode, and you can make tracks and share them, and you can do like really bizarre things. Like I would make monster chickens and just put them on the track, and you would like crash into them and stuff. Like it was just funny, but it's another one of those games that had like really innovative and cool ideas. It just never went anywhere.
Yeah, I remember playing it for a little while too, and I liked it. It was one of the more unique sort of kart racers, like like you said, with the customizable stuff and making your own tracks and shit like that. It was always a novel idea. So yeah, I did enjoy some Mod Nation Racers. So 2011, nothing going on. Some game called Armageddon Riders, not worth really noting. And then 2012 is where I think all this just kind of officially died, and we had Dirt Showdown, which was actually pretty fun. It was more of a destruction derby type wrecking racing game that we all played for a while there on the 360. It was pretty fun. And then Little Big Planet Karting. I don't think I ever played that one. Did you?
No, I didn't. I wasn't a Little Big Planet fan.
Yeah, me neither. And then Gas Guzzlers Extreme, which was not horrible, but not great. And then what we all consider the death of car combat, which is Twisted Metal 2012 for the PS3. And what a fucking shit show that was. I don't think I've ever been more excited for a game in my entire life leading up to that, especially because we had the whole community, and everyone was like seeking out any information and sharing it on the website all the time, and people were following Dave Jaffe looking for any morsel of information that he would drop on Twitter, and it was just a magical time. And we all thought this was going to be finally the car combat multiplayer game that we've all deserved and waited for, and started playing it and immediately was just turned off by the single player. So they boiled it down to only 3 characters that had storylines. Sort of went back to the cheesy FMV style, like live action sort of cutscenes and stuff like that, which was really fun. But outside of that, I didn't like the boss fights. I hated the boss fights in that game. I thought the game was like extremely brutal and hard. Like I was having trouble getting through it. And then the multiplayer was just, they abandoned it immediately. It was fucking broken. Trying to get on teams with your friends and make teams, and it was just awful. And I bailed on that game so fucking hard. We've talked about this on the podcast, but yeah, well, I don't know. Anything else you want to add to this fucking travesty that is Twisted Metal 2012?
It's like you said, we were all excited for it. We got it, almost immediately disappointed in it, and we dropped it super quick. Like I said in the last episode with Rhodey, we both went to GameStop and traded it in within 14 days of owning it. Like that's how disappointed we were. It just, like, why did Jaffe have to like reinvent the fucking game? Like, yes, we wanted team modes and stuff like that, but he completely like changed everything. Like the base of the game was fine, but you like made like all these other like weird things part of the game that like didn't need to be part of it, and like making like cults or gangs out of like oh, Sweet Tooth has a gang, and like Dollface has a gang, and Preacher has a gang, and all this stuff, and Mr. Grimm, and like you're changing like all these weird things. You're reinventing the whole game when we didn't need that. Just, you should have just built off of what you already had, instead of like making a nuke mode and you gotta like fire a nuke and do this and that, and just if you're gonna make a multiplayer game, fucking have it work day one, not like disconnect and like brick people's fucking PlayStations. Like shut it. What a fucking disaster.
Yeah,
what a fucking idiot.
Tons of auto aim weapons.
Yeah, that too.
Unsatisfying, like dumbed down gameplay. And I hated that motherfucking goddamn helicopter vehicle in there. Like, just get that shit the fuck out of there, man. That was just... People would be such a fucking bitch, just like flying around the level sniping with that cunt. And it was just the worst, man. Like, it just, everything about it was just, man, I was just so fucking sad about that. But it's not worth talking about anymore. It's done. We're putting it behind us. But yeah, I mean, so like I said, from here, from like 2013 on, I mean, we got another Carmageddon game, and then a bunch of failed or lackluster early access and crowd-funded projects. There's been too many to name. It felt like every 6 months or so, like some like weird car combat game would pop up, and someone in our fucking group somewhere would share it, be like, "Oh, have you guys seen this?" And you look at it, and it's just people just don't really seem to understand what makes a good car combat game. They just think that like there's cars with guns on them, and you just shoot the guns, and that's fun. And people don't understand like the depth that was in like Twisted Metal Black, and there's some of the shit like Vigilante 8. Like the weapons have to be fun and interesting. You need to be able to dodge them, and there needs to be more than just like driving in circles around your opponent, like firing missiles and fucking machine guns at them. Like people just don't understand what makes a good car combat game, and that's why, in my opinion, all these just keep failing because they're not fun or interesting. And I don't know. I just don't know if we're ever going to get the car combat game we deserve. I think it's just a fucking dying dream at this point, because, I mean, the only thing that could happen is if, Sony gave Twisted Metal one more shot, which I wouldn't put out of the realm of possibility, but that would be the only thing to me that could spark life back into this genre. And, sometimes I think it's like, man, I just don't even know if I care anymore. I don't know. What's your final thoughts on this to sort of wrap this up and bring it home here?
So you mean to tell me that Twisted Metal isn't going to make a comeback when they make a Netflix series out of it?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that'll be the one, man.
That's what's going to reinvigorate the whole franchise and bring it back to the forefront. Yeah, it's so unfortunate that I have so many memories, made so many friends like yourself, had great times online, hours, days, months, years spent playing these types of games, and it just fizzled out. Like maybe that's just how a genre goes. It just gets played out. I don't really know. Like it's just sad. I'm sure one day we'll probably get some car combat games that will be decent. But I don't think we should be holding our breath to like relive the glory days of this genre.
Sadly, I agree.
We are Apocalypse 9, and it will be our pleasure to blast you to bits and begin to rid the world of your rotten species. See you on the rooftops. Get up! Oh, get up! I want to now! You are stupid! What are you looking at? Come on. You. Here! Come on! Where's Woody? What? Oh! Get up! Get up! Get up! Get up! You can have your face out! Come on! There it is. You stupid! You're gonna die!